a great word. What a great name, especially for somebody who is a licensed clinical social worker with a private practice in Lower Manhattan, where she provides individual, couples, and family therapy. She provides hope for the people she works with. She's here today to talk about something called resilient thinking. She's here to talk to us about how we can achieve our goals from a place of working from our strengths. She's just written a new book called the Resilience Workbook for Women, a transformative guide to discover your inner strength, conquer adversity, and achieve your goals. Now, our podcast starts with a little bit of a situation in Lower Manhattan, where she lives. Clearly, somebody's about to be arrested. Something went down. There's multiple cop cars. There's fire trucks. There's ambulances. There's all kinds of shit happening. But once we get past that, things calm down and we enter just the most incredible conversation. So sit back and enjoy our 50-minute conversation with Hope from New York City.
Find and learn from people who lived it, wherever you get podcasts. Search it using all one word. Learn from people who lived it.
Welcome to another episode of Learn from People Who Lived It.
Hi, everybody. I'm Hope Kelaher, and I'm coming in from New York City, Manhattan.
Yeah, what's up, Hope? So happy you're here. Here's two questions for you. Number one, what story are you here to share today?
I am grateful for this opportunity, and the story that I'm here to share is one of how to cultivate and resource your own resilience. So when you're having a hard time, you can trust within yourself that you can overcome it and be even better on the other side.
Ooh, so who do you hope hears this?
I hope everybody hears this, but also people who might be feeling really low or overwhelmed or hopeless. That's my hope, and that was part of the intent of writing my book, The Resilience Workbook for Women.
All right, watch this, everybody. I'm going to throw it up. There it is, right there next to her on the screen. If you're watching us on YouTube, The Resilience Workbook for Women. And she's going to share that today with two guys. It's not me alone. I've got Dr. Frank Bavacqua to the south of us right now. Frank, how are you feeling?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, man. I'm glad you're here because, you've got a woman in your life and you got a baby girl, right? Mm-hmm. And so here we got this genius on the show with us today who's going to share with us all of the secrets that she's learned throughout the years. And I think resilience is one of those words that we're starting to learn some more about. And Frank, I want you to tell me what resilience means to you. And then we're going to go to the north and figure out what she thinks about it. So when you hear that word resilience, man, what do you think about it?
I mean, the really cliche is like falling down but getting back up, right? Not giving in to whatever circumstance or challenge might be trying to prevent you from getting where you want to go, but figuring out a way to persevere and keep trying and ultimately get where you're trying to get to.
Okay, Hope, what's your take on resilience?
Well, I definitely agree with Frank, and it's one's ability to not only rebound, but one's ability to create a new narrative that is fitting, even if the circumstances are different from what they had hoped.
Yeah, that's it. So when it comes to resilience, do you guys think that, well, Hope, I want to stay with you on this. Do you think that resilience is something that you can teach people, or do you think that's something they have to discover on their own?
I think it's a mixture of both ends.
Okay.
And so there are three types of resilience. There's natural/genetic resilience. And so there's, a small, but there is literature on how there is a genetic component. And then there's natural resilience, right? Where, maybe you're a little kid out on the soccer team and, you get the ball kicked in your head and you have a moment and then you kind of get back to it, right? So that's sort of like learned, right? You kind of figure out you can't give up. And those might be like micro things that teach us how to adapt to situations, right? New York City, notoriously known for subway delays. Like how do you move around? How do you renegotiate that circumstance? And we all kind of do that. Some of us on bigger levels, some of us on smaller levels. And the book it aims to kind of really help build restorative resilience, which is like taught skills. So it's a combination of all three factors. And so those of us who might not have the the genetic components of natural resilience can utilize moments where they've implemented adaptive resilience and then some of the skills in the book. So for example, restored resilience might be somebody who's experienced a traumatic event and is having PTSD symptoms. So like getting the proper mental health supports, the proper networks, like that is how you can build your resilience when you've experienced like a big T trauma event, just for example.
Yeah. Frank, how do you feel like your resilience level is? You feel like you're pretty resilient dude?
I like to say, yeah, and it's weird, like how funny, like
I'm coming
it's
to you
hard,
next, Hope.
it's hard to like give yourself that compliment sometimes, but like, yes, if I look at the biggest and best things that I have accomplished in life, I don't think any of them happened like the first try or easily or quickly, right? The biggest and best accomplishments I think that I can point to and be proud of are things that took a really long time, and that there was adversity along the way, or moments where I almost stopped working toward that thing. So yeah, I like to think that I'm, I think a lot of times I win because I give up later than other people. Not because I'm necessarily better than other people. And I've always used the word stubborn, right? I'm too stubborn. If I want the thing bad enough, I'm too stubborn to quit. And I guess that's kind of resilience.
Interesting. Hope, what about you? How are you at resilience? So what kind of grade would you give yourself?
I think I'm highly resilient.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting. I was just thinking back to my college days, and I went to Johns Hopkins, which is a very competitive school. I'm just thinking about how I would always do terrible on the first paper or first exam. And I would have this like unconscious positive thought, like, okay, I really can't get worse than this. And I wasn't like failing, but it was, there was this other part of me, right? And I'm also trained in internal family systems, but there was this other part of me that's like, you know what, you just got to give up. You're not going to make this. You're not as smart as everyone else. But I kind of always think of things of like, okay, like, well, how much lower can the floor fall, right? And so I think that has been tremendously helpful for me. And sorry, my little dog is in the background, so hopefully you guys don't have a problem.
No sweat. What's the little dog's name?
Luna.
Oh, you know
Luna.
what? I read that about you in your bio, and I was like, that's funny because I have a bald cat named Luna.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, she might pop up on my lap in a minute. So.
I like the elephant that's right behind Hope, and because I share this story from time to time, but 3 years ago I went on a really deep mental and spiritual retreat, and there were a lot of powerful things that were uttered to me during this retreat, but one of the most powerful was a counselor who said, "You're the elephant tied to a plastic chair." And and it was such a powerful like visual for me that elephant thinks that he cannot move and he cannot go anywhere, and he does not even recognize that it's a little plastic chair. And the moment he moves, it's coming with him. And that's kind of resilience, I think, when you get to that point where you're like, you know what, it's just time to pull up my pants and get going. And so I want to segue into some of the stuff that you write about in your book. And there's different categories where people need help, and one of those is breakups. And so I want to start to talk about, some more pointed things that you write about, because let's learn from you, right? That's why we have this podcast. So when you talk about breakups, I'm guessing you're talking about relationships mostly, or are you talking about maybe like I'm not with my company anymore, or is it more like personal relationships?
Yeah, so the book sort of runs the gamut in terms of what context. And I definitely, a lot of these skills can be applied to any kind of breakup or friendship breakup, intimate partner breakup, maybe isolation from family or separation from work. But I think resilience often comes up when people are, separating from an intimate other. and need that extra support. I often see people in my practice where there's a lot of ruminating thoughts, and a lot of just negativity, that kind of keeps people stuck, right? From moving on and from seeing what their life could be like, if they were to move past that inertia.
What do you want to say about that, Frank, when it comes to breakups? What's one of those things that people get real stuck on?
I will share a
Just talk
personal
about
story.
yourself.
Yeah, no, I mean, I thought I was the guest today. I don't know.
Yeah, no,
maybe.
you're fine.
I am married now, happily married.
I was there.
Yeah, I know. You were kind of an important part of that. It's only been a year and a half, right? So like, obviously, it's early, but I feel like it's going to be good for a real long time. But it's funny, like I didn't get married until I was a couple of months shy of 39. And there were multiple relationships over the last couple of decades. And, they all start out maybe feeling promising, and then obviously they ultimately end. And there starts to be that little voice of like, maybe I'm not good enough, right? For the kind of person that I want, maybe I'm not good enough for that kind of person. And that absolutely had me convinced, somewhere in my mid-30s, had me convinced that like I was never going to find the type of relationship that I wanted. Yeah, and I think somewhere along the way, the reframe was less about, am I good enough or not, or is someone else good enough for me, but really, are we a fit for each other, right? Because there are plenty of great people that I know that would not be a fit for me. And so I think once I had that reframe from good enough to fit, it was luck, right? Preparation meets opportunity, but then I found my person. But all of those there were those ruminating thoughts after each of those breakups of like, how did I fail here? In what way was I not good enough here? And I took lots of time after each of those breakups to really kind of get my head back in a spot where I was like willing to try again, willing to open up again. Because they're hard. Every time you think this is going to be the one and it's not, like that's hard to come back from and try again.
I want to ask you something, Hope, that's going through my brain right now. I'm thinking about breakups, and I'm thinking about like one of your girlfriends calls and it's like, hey, we ended our relationship. We're not together anymore. And there's like two schools of thought, right? Like one girlfriend's in your ear going, it's time to go out. It's time to party. It's time to get right back on the horse. And the other person's like, girl, you need to be single for a year and you need to figure out who you are and what you're all about. And I love the duality of that. I want you to talk about it.
I mean, it sounds like a lot of my female friends, but I think resilience is. I think as it relates to resilience, it's like trusting your gut, right? There might be moments in your life where you need to go out and experience other people. There might be moments where you need to be a little bit more reflective, and kind of figure stuff out for yourself. I don't think that there's a right or a wrong way. Every relationship is different, and therefore every breakup is different. But I think the ones that where people need to kind of resource their own resilience, in my anecdotal experience, are those where maybe there was some infidelity, where it does feel like very internalized. If an affair happened, cheating, infidelity, like that can also often feel very personal. And that's where I see a lot of people needing to summon up more taught resilience.
Yeah, I like that you said that. I've always had kind of one relationship rule in my life, and it's one that I pass along to my boys too. I'm like, stay in relationship until you don't create good karma together. And once you guys get to a point where it's starting to be not like it's not working out and it's starting to spill into other areas, it's time to examine that relationship and maybe consider that it's run its course, or it's time to hit pause on it and it can come back into a later chapter.
And there can be an opportunity.
Go expand on that.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes, when one thing sort of unfolds, life is about change, right? That's the only constant. And so life is about the unfolding and the refolding all the time. And so often if people can move past like that heartbreak, there's a better opportunity, and they've learned so much more about themselves that they can take to the next person. They can carry the threads of goodness from all of their relationships and insert that into the next one. So I am actually like a big, I started my career in, I'm a relational therapist in New York City, but I am like a social worker, right? And I love being a social worker. And it was when I was doing field work in the low income, kind of disenfranchised communities in New York City. And I was in not protective services, but child welfare services, where I came into homes, did family therapy, tried to keep the kids and the family stable. And of course, nobody wants anybody related to children's services coming to their home ever. But, my mantra was, okay, I'm here now, and what opportunity, I'm here regardless of whether or not you guys like it, right? I'm probably court ordered. So how can we create an opportunity out of this? And often that, like when I could get some of my clients and families to see that, they were like, okay, actually, maybe you can help me get this service for my kid, or this or that. And then when you see things as an opportunity, I think it helps regulate the nervous system, but so much more can come out of that. And I think it's similar to, when people break up or lose a job. I once had to let a woman go when I was managing a child services program. And it was really hard for me because she was the first person I ever had to fire. And she came back and she's like, thank you for firing me, because that was not a fit. And that was a terrible job. And, she's so much more fulfilled. You don't often hear that, actually, like, thank you. Yeah. Right. So I think that is, that's sort of like, I think maybe that's part of my natural resilience, but it's something I definitely reinforce for myself and for my clients all the time.
Well, and what you've said is such an important thing. And Frank, I'm going to ask you a question in a second, so get yourself ready. But when you frame it as an opportunity, because you're right, in that role that you had, it would be very easy for those people to be like, no way, dude. Like, we are not, I am not participating in this. But if they can get it framed like it's opportunity, then you're right. It becomes exciting. It's empowering, right? You're kind of putting it in their hands. And so, Frank, the question for you is the importance of reframing things, just to look at them through a different lens.
I don't think you can really move forward without it. Because without that hope or belief that something could be better in the future, it's really hard to work toward it, right? Because otherwise, what am I working toward? But I will say, we've used the term duality, and we've talked about things in the past where two things can be simultaneously true and are probably going to be, right? Like, I can simultaneously be upset about this job loss or this relationship ending. I can mourn the loss of the positive pieces of that, even if it was just a paycheck, right? I'm mourning the temporary loss of the paycheck, mourning the, in a relationship sense, like usually the beginning of that relationship has lots of good things. And when the relationship ends, those good things kind of go away and fade away. The memories of them fade away. And that's sad. And what is also true is there is probably a better fit and a better opportunity moving forward. So it's not, the friend who comes along and tries to tell you, well, she was awful. She wasn't good for you anyway. You're going to find somebody better, that kind of a thing. Like, you might find somebody better or a better fit for you. Like, that part may be true, but we also can't dismiss the reality of like the negative feelings, the sadness, the mourning, the loss, all those pieces too. Both things are simultaneously true. And I think you have to give at least a little bit of time and effort to both of them.
I want to move us to something that I know a lot about because of personal experience, and that's career challenges. I think a lot of people, and especially in a post-COVID world, man, there's a lot of people, and thank God, they're waking up and they're going, is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? Is this really where I belong? And they're not, I don't want to say having an identity crisis, but I'm going to call it that because to me, it's a good thing. Like, we should be examining ourselves a little closer to say, is this where I belong and where I want to be? When you talk about career challenges, Hope, especially as it relates to the book, which I'll put up on the screen for everybody to see right now, the Resilience Workbook for Women. What kind of career challenges are folks coming to you to work through right now? What's kind of some hot buttons?
One thing is like when someone has like a parallel life course transition and has to manage work. So in my work with a lot of women, pregnancy and childbirth can create challenges. Especially in New York City, where so many people work for corporate America. And more women, are taking on the financial responsibilities of home and all of the childcare. That is one theme. Mismatch in skill, right? And that can be really hard when people sort of, need to level up and they're having a hard time being able to do that. And then also like discrimination and gender bias is something I have seen over the years, although anecdotally in my practice, it feels like it's gotten much better. And then also for women who are, I've seen this a little bit, like really powerful, heavy lies the crown and dealing with a lot of emotional stress, not only just from kind of meeting their numbers and their P&L or whatever you call it, but kind of managing people and all of the interpersonal dynamics that can come up and the stress. So those are some of the career-related challenges that I think are impacting all of my clients, but in particular women at this time.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, it's not cool that these things are happening. It's great that we're talking about them because it's time to put this stuff on the table. I mean, what I do in my day-to-day world, Hope, is go and work with companies and schools who have dysfunction in their schools. And it's usually because people are they're stressed out with many external factors. I mean, sometimes there are things that are happening at work and we can fix those things in those systems. But what I find most of the time is that people are dealing with stuff outside of the office and they're bringing that to the office. And then based on sort of the way that they operate their lives, there is the recipe for really, really challenging things. So here's a good question that you both can play around with a little bit. What's your strategy as professionals to get people who are unaware that they are the issue to become aware that they are the issue? Okay, Frank, you're laughing. Hope, or you want to go first? Or you want to serve with one of him first?
I'll take it. So as a systemic therapist, I don't think about just the individual in a bubble.
Yeah.
I'm often using a technique called circular questioning. So if this person were in the room, what might we hear them say? And becoming curious about like the other perspectives, right? And then challenging, right? There are multiple stories to every truth, and exploring what those other narratives might be. And then just like doing some reality testing.
That's so I love that because anybody can do that. Like, yes, it's so much better if you work it out with a pro, but any of us could have a messed up situation at work and get in the car on the way home and be like, am I seeing this from all the sides? And so that's why I think that's such great advice. What were you going to say, Frank? You started laughing right away.
Well, because I was laughing because what you really just want to do is just tell people, right? Like, this is your fault. That doesn't work even a little. And so sometimes, like when I'm trying to kind of help somebody take a step forward, sometimes I take fault off the table, right? And I talk about the difference between like fault and responsibility, right? And so fault is what are we attributing to how we ended up here, right? Who is to blame or what circumstances to blame? And responsibility is whose responsibility is it to move you forward into the new direction. And so we can kind of ignore sometimes how we got here. And let's just talk about what role you can play with the responsibility that you have to move forward. And I think sometimes during that process, some people can have the insight and kind of put together like, oh, well, if these steps are my responsibility moving forward, that's kind of related to some opposite things that I was doing before. So maybe that helps. But I think in some cases, the admittance of, I'm the reason I ended up here is not necessarily a requirement to move forward, because if we can just take responsibility from where we are right now and start talking about the future, well, that's something.
And the other side of that, I was listening to you talk, Frank, and I was thinking, I want to ask Hope this question. It's like the other side of that is probably not very healthy either, where it's like always my fault, where, you default to like, it's me, I'm the problem.
I think, and I really liked what you said, Frank, about being accountable, but I think you're right. It's a balance of interjecting compassion and not internalizing the shaming and blaming. But I also become curious, like I really am not a hippy dippy person, but I believe in the universe. I really do. And I know that, Matt and I were talking a little bit before about synchronicity and energy, and like, when you meet a point of resistance, like, what is the universe trying to tell you, right? If you're having like a really crappy day at work, right? I'm thinking about one client in particular who is, just this powerhouse of a person, and all of the internal conflicts that she's having, internal and external relational conflicts. What is the universe trying to tell you? Because we, like, as humans, especially as resilient humans, sometimes we like to push and push and push, and it might not be our path, right? Like, it might not be our energetic field, if I'm using that term, right? But like, what is it trying to tell us? If you're in a job and you're having all of these struggles and you're bringing it home, I don't know, it is a point of, it can be, and it should be a point of reflection, right?
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. But it's hard, right? Like, because sometimes people have it in their head, like, I'm going to be this thing, or I'm going to do this thing, and nothing's going to, like, Frank, you even talked about it earlier, right? Like, I'm stubborn. I put my head to something, it's getting done. And, but yo, hold on a second. Like, start paying attention to the signs too. Let's go for that dream, but let's be open to the fact that it might not work out too. And that to me is one of the bigger pieces of solving the Rubik's Cube of life, is letting go of the control and the expectations of what it's supposed to look like.
Exactly. And I think, it's interesting, just reflecting on my own life, I am a cisgendered white heterosexual female that has no bio kids, right? And I always wanted kids, and it didn't work out for a variety of reasons. And, when I realized that it wasn't, when my marriage was ending, and I'm still very close with my ex-husband. He's actually one of my closest people. But thinking about, okay, so what is my life going to look like? And that can be very hopeless, right? Because you're losing the dream, right? You're losing that script that you were adhering to, right? You're 20-something, you're 30-something, like, I want to get married, I want to have a baby, I want to do this, I want to do that. And like, you get there and it's like, you're like, there's that resistance, right? And one of the most beautiful things that my friend's mother once shared with me, she said, Hope, I want you to go back to that book, Under the Tuscan Sun. She's like, remember in the 90s, like, it was a big movie. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it.
I've heard of it.
And I had heard of it, but I had never watched it. And I think I had the big book when I was in like middle school or something. And I sat and I watched it. And it's about this woman who's a writer in San Francisco, and her husband, they break up, and she's just distraught, and she goes to a book signing and is told her work is crap, and she's really despondent. And her two best friends are supposed to go on this trip to Tuscany, and they can't because they're trying to get pregnant. And, she wanted to have her family, children, happy marriage, whatever. And so she buys this nutty house in Tuscany, and she doesn't know what to do with it. She doesn't speak the language. She puts herself in in this like really challenging predicament. And through the course of the book, and I'm going to spill the beans because it's an old book and everybody, can just it's not that just about that. It's not just about the journey. I think is the most important thing. And the ending is just helpful to know. But so she doesn't have her own kids, but her friend who was doing the IVF ends up moving to her Tuscan villa. So she has a kid. She wanted to get remarried. She doesn't get remarried, but she has a partner, and there's a wedding at her house. And so it's about how you look at things, right? And so, when I was in that situation, that was a piece of advice that my networks suggested. And honestly, if I hadn't gone through that, My partner has this like 12-year-old kid. He's like my functional step kid. He's great. I'm blessed that I didn't have to go through all of that hard work, right? I owe it to his parents. But it's about how you see it. So you kind of have to be willing to let go and radically accept. And one of my favorite mantras is trust the unfolding of life and you shall meet it well.
Yeah, I love that. I have my mala beads from my spiritual journey in them, and what I rotate on them is I let go and I trust the process of life. I let go. This is not for me to control, and that's such a freeing headspace. And people think that that's going to be a difficult thing. I know I certainly thought that was going to be a difficult thing, because to me, I always talk about this. I couldn't let go of that idea. For me, letting go was the same thing as I stopped caring. And I couldn't reconcile that for the longest time. It felt like I can't let it go, because then that means I don't care about it anymore, when actually I've come to learn it's the opposite. And there's so much freedom in, I don't have to control this situation. This thing over here can blow up and do whatever it's going to do. And that's fine. It's not for me to fix. I don't have to get involved. And I was one of these people that, because I am a good mediator, because of the trauma-filled home that I grew up in, that's a good skill for me. I put my energy into too many situations where I didn't belong, and I didn't need to be fixing these things, and I didn't need to be the mediators here. So that's been a big thing for me to kind of overcome in my life, is that idea that letting go is not the same as I stop caring. You can care about something and you can let it go. So would anybody like to say anything about that, or we move on to another thing? It's fine.
Yeah, I'll just say one thing.
Please.
I think, from a gendered perspective, what has been really helpful for me is that, the world today looks so different than the world of like my mother, my grandmother. And so if I have to let go of, say, having a child of my own, that is more accepted, right? That I don't have to conform to society's narrative about who I am, how I have to navigate myself in this world, and like what I need to do. And so I think right, having written this book and thinking about like my foremothers, right, like, and sort of what they had to navigate, like I'm blessed that like I can create the wonkiest narrative and the wonkiest story and the wonkiest setup, and we're in a more accepting world, and so that is also part of like a strength that I source from, and
Woo!
that is
fireworks off.
I didn't know that your thing could do that.
That's so awesome. No, it's cool, and it's cool for both, right? Like I love that men are now, we're allowed to be a little bit more emotional, and we're allowed to like kind of go inside and figure out who we are. And I always talk about this. Like I couldn't stand the male toxicity in my life growing up. Like everybody was a puffer, puffing their chest, whose wiener's bigger. Like it was just such a jock show that I did not get down with. I did not like it. It was just never my vibe. And like finally, right? Like just in the last 10 to 15 years, I get to be a little bit more of me. I get to be a little bit more of a softer, sensitive.
Authentic.
More me. I'm more aligned with who I am. And I think that's the cool part, is that people are allowed to like step into their true self a little bit more now, because it's accepted. There's other people doing it. Like you're not the pioneer here. You're doing the thing a lot of people should be doing. Frank, anything you would like to add to that?
Well, you kind of use the phrase like that. We'll call it like switching gears if you're switching away from something, that it means you're not caring. And my struggle was always, if I switch focus towards something else, that means I'm quitting. And I don't like being a quitter. And so that would keep me stuck working towards something or in a situation that I didn't truly want to be in anymore, or wasn't good for me. And so using that word, quitting, prevented me from being resilient in a different kind of way, moving on towards something that would be, better for me. So yeah, the words that we use and how we label things and how we describe things and the narrative we tell ourselves is either going to help us move forward or keep us stuck.
Yeah. Do you do a lot of that too, Hope? Do you like make sure the people you're working with, like, hold on, because I think he's right. That language, the words you use are really important. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and as a believer in quantum physics, like our thoughts and our words have energy, right? And so I really, my clients know I'm rather direct, right? And I catch them, right? I catch that bullet. Okay, are you a quitter? Or is there a different frame that we can come up with, right?
I like that. That's the best thing about what you guys do. And I'm talking about you guys as professionals. Like, you're so good at helping people reframe it. That's why, we have 3 pillars on this podcast. The first pillar is, hey, let me help you feel less alone. So let's get somebody on the show who's got a story like yours, and let's connect, and you can see that you're not alone in the world. The second goal of this podcast has always been to get you to talk about it. So go to see a therapist, go get a counselor, go talk to some guru. Go talk to your pastor, like wherever you can find somebody who will listen and ask you the right thoughtful questions to help you sort this thing out. Like, just go do that. And then our third pillar has always been, when you're ready, share your story with us so that the next person can learn from what you've had to kind of go through. I want to move on. And the title of the book, by the way, and I'll put it up here so that everybody can see it, The Resilience Workbook for Women. But it's a transformative guide to discover your inner strength, conquer adversity, and achieve your goals. And I thought, why don't we wrap up today talking about that third part, which is achieving your goals? So many people have as I just mentioned a moment ago, have their eyes and sights set on new things, on different things. We're learning a lot more about how we learn and the power of the brain and all these things that we're kind of talking about today. So when you're helping folks achieve their goals, do you have a framework that you use, Hope?
I have a loose framework,
Yeah.
right? I guess that's a very big question. And I think it's very relative to the strengths that each individual is bringing into the session.
It's a good thing to say.
I work from a strengths-based perspective, right? And so I'm always trying to reinforce, in Western culture, we like to focus on the things that aren't working. And that is such a huge roadblock to people achieving their goals. So I think it depends on what is presented for me, before me. But one of the key components in this frame is, can you take a risk? And if not, how can we help you summon up the courage to be that vulnerable and take a risk, right? If somebody wants to break up with their partner, okay, maybe that is a goal. And how can we, what are the resources and the strengths that they can utilize to kind of help them move forward with that? Or, thinking about, what they're good at, what they're not good at, who are their supports, I call them strawberry people. Who are the people in their worlds that can give them advice on very specific things? Yeah, I don't know if you need to expand a little bit more.
Well, yeah, probably, but I like it. It's a good idea. I mean, first and foremost, when you have but you've also done a thing where you've made me rethink the question that I asked you, because you said something really interesting there. You some people have the goal of ending a relationship, and it's like, yeah, you're right. That is a goal. I think I was approaching it more from I have this career aspiration, or I have this new business I want to start, or I have this book I want to write, or something like that. But you remind me that life is simple, and sometimes the goal is I just got to get the hell out of this thing first. And so you do have to play into people's strengths, and that's a good place for them to start. So, Frank, anything you want to add real quick, and then I'll let her expand on that?
Not yet. Keep going.
Yeah, do it.
Yeah, and I think it's also about resilient thinking, right? And sort of that kind of is connected to the strengths, and cultivating people's positivity and optimism, which can lead to hopefulness.
Yes. Yeah, right. Because when we lose hope, then it's tough to,
right.
It's a tough place to come off the ground.
And so fear and hope come from the same place, the unknown, and you get to choose, right? So if somebody wants to step out of maybe a domestic violence relationship, right? that could be a goal. Or right now I'm working with somebody who, is not really satisfied in their public service job. So we're kind of using the frame of the Ikigai, and I do write about it. But sort of like what you're good at, what is something you can do that you're good at that you can get paid for? What brings you a sense of purpose and what brings you a sense of happiness? Mm-hmm. And there are some like very concrete kind of tools in my book, like the Hope Map is one of them. It's really a workbook that you don't have to go through the whole book to kind of get whatever you need out of it. You can pick and choose and kind of just surf the book to look for different exercises.
Fair enough. Frank, talk to me about achieving goals and how you might approach it.
I'm pausing for so long because I realize like there are a lot of people who don't necessarily know what their goal is. And I've had plenty of moments, I think we all have if we look at it, like where we don't actually know what our goal is in a given moment. We know there's something about the current situation that we don't like. And sometimes we don't know if that means we need to change something or we just need to kind of persevere through. So I think to add on to what Hope already said, like I start way at the beginning, like, are we clear about what the actual goal is? Because sometimes people don't know. And Hope, I want to throw this question to you. And I'll kind of set it up a little more, but essentially the question is like, if somebody ends up in front of you and they don't know what their goal is, right? How do you help them figure out what their goal should be or is? And I want to set up just kind of a little bit more just to make sure that you're understanding what's in my brain right now, because I think it's been in a lot of our brains. Like there are times either in a relationship or a job, or, I think back to grad school or lots of things where like there are hard moments, there are challenges, there are roadblocks, there are uncomfortable things, there are unfortunate things that are presented to us. And sometimes ultimately the right answer is like, we're not in the right environment and we need to change it. We need to change the job. We need to get out of that relationship. Sometimes it's the complete opposite, that like this is a worthwhile thing and there are going to be hard things along the way. And so we don't run away from it, right? We keep pushing through it. Like if you're training for a marathon, right? Like running all those miles day after day after day, like it is just
painful.
Hard. And there's no way around the hard or the pain. Like if you want the thing at the end, like you just have to keep doing it. And then there's kind of a middle ground where it's like, okay, I know this thing is going to be hard, but am I making it harder on myself than I need to? Are there subtle things that I can change in terms of like the way that I get to that outcome that might make it easier, right? So there's at least 3 different options, right? Completely abandon, totally push through, or some kind of middle ground. And I think there are lots of people who know that they're uncomfortable or unhappy right now, and they truly don't know which one of those 3 things they're supposed to do. So when that happens, how do you help them to figure that out?
I mean, again, I think it's really who the person is before me. I think what's coming up for me now is like, what is the meaning of this current contemplative position, right? Like, what does it say about where you're at now that you're in my office and this is something, right? And then I would become really curious about the why. Mm-hmm. And I saw this a lot during the pandemic, where people were really reevaluating their lives and wanted to get out of their places of work. And I kind of go a little bit more existential, like to you, like what is the richest life possible? How do you define that? And I'll give you like a little like case example. Working with this high achieving woman, corporate America, young person, but really wanted to be a personal trainer. right? So, it comes to me during the pandemic for support, but, we focus a lot on what's not working. And then thinking about like what gave this person joy, right? And so how could they make that into something that is fruitful? And then also, like, again, I think this is like putting the it might be too much hippy dippy stuff, but when we start to envision what our richest life will be, like what actually comes up. And when I ask those questions to my friends and clients, it's often not about like things or money. It's about community, family, time, doing something that has a sense of meaning. And I kind of like to start there, right? So like, why are you here now? And what does it mean? And then when I ask you this question without overthinking, like, what are the things that pop up for you? And so with this one person, it was really about like, really personal training, right? And it's hard. And so here's the thing, we get to choose our own suffering. And the cost of suffering in like a staid corporate America job, did not, it was not, it was more costly to her than beneficial to kind of pursue the other opportunity.
I love that phrase, and I don't know who I heard it from.
That's an Eckhart Tolle thing. You get to choose your suffering.
Yeah, well, to choose your hard is the phrase that I've heard more recent. But yeah, I mean, same kind of concept. Like, it is hard to work out and watch what you eat and be like, it is hard to live a healthy lifestyle, at least to get yourself going in that direction. And it's a little hard to maintain it even once you do, but it's also hard to live an unhealthy life or live as an unhealthy person down the road, right? So you're choosing your hard, you're choosing your suffering. But I like that. I like that in order to figure out what somebody should do right now. And I've always kind of thought about this too, like, you skip all the way to the end, right? What is the end result, the big picture that you're trying to achieve? And then we can decide if the things in your life right now are supporting that direction or not. But it's only once you know where you're going that you can kind of figure out if you're heading in the right direction.
Right. And also having the recognition that it might change and morph, and it's an iterative process, right? Because not getting it too attached to the outcome, right?
I've learned to laugh at the "where do you see yourself in 5 years" question, because if I think back to any point in the last like 10 or 15 years, at any one of those ages, if you would have asked me what my life would look like 5 years from then, like, I probably would have been wrong every single time. And so, yeah, to me, it's become less about the milestones, I guess, along the way, and more just about the values and priorities. And if I keep my values and priorities consistent, the day-to-day stuff might look different. But then kind of what Mathew was saying before, like, I can at least live a life that I feel comfortable with, that it's authentic to who I am and what I care about. But the stuff in my life, the thing that I'm actually doing for work, or I mean anything, like, that might be different than what I predict it's going to be in a couple of years, and probably will be different than what I predict.
Love it. Well, listen, I always had the ending in mind when we begin a podcast. And so I've got 3 hard-hitting questions for Hope as we wrap up here today on Learn from People Who Lived It. In her bio, she writes that she is into training for half marathons. So good on you, Frank, with the running analogy. That was spot on.
Nailed it.
So question number 1 is, what shoes do you run in?
I gotta tell you, like, I don't know. I just have these shoes that I get from Amazon. I've been buying the same ones over and over. I actually need a new pair of sneakers.
Okay.
But I'm currently not training for any half or marathon. So that's on a pause for right now.
Question number 2, you also say that you're into fishing. So
yes.
What kind of fishing do you like to do, and are you good at it?
It depends on the type of fishing.
Yeah, there comes the balloons.
So I would say that I'm fairly decent at deep sea fishing, although I'm very tiny, so sometimes the fish are bigger than me. I like big game fish like sailfish and tuna and mahi mahi.
Wow.
I like when I was a kid, I used to go bone fishing with my aunt and uncle. I'm fairly good at fly fishing. I used to do spear fishing. I'm absolutely terrible because I'm terrible at it. So I think I've caught like one fish maybe. But it's fun and it's cool to do, just the experience of that. I'm terrible at that, but the other types of fishing I'm
Pretty good at.
fairly decent at.
That's so cool. Fishing's one of my favorite things in the whole world. It was probably one of my favorite things to do with my dad, and he's been gone for a really long time. So it's one of those things where it's a pure connection point to me, to him, and I really love it. And then you're into cooking. So what kinds of what did you cook last night? There we go.
Oh, last night I had Shake Shack because I had a session that went until like 9:15. I really like cooking with a bluefish, sort of like a Vietnamese. It's a New York Times cooking kind of caramelized bluefish. I very much enjoy like pasta. I'm really a big fish person, so I also like to do some nice monkfish, and then sort of like shrimp saganaki, which is like a Greek way that they prepare some shrimp. So it's like tomatoes and feta and basil and garlic and lemon.
Damn, man.
Yeah.
Sounds like things are good at your place, that's for sure. Frank, are you what meal would you rather prepare? A breakfast, lunch, or dinner? Like, what would you say your specialty is?
Oh, I am great at breakfast.
You are?
Yeah.
What specifically?
Okay, I can only make eggs one way, so
Okay.
it's scrambled or bust. But I can do bacon, eggs, French toast. Like I've done breakfast for dinner before.
Oh, it's so good. That's so good.
So yeah.
All right. What about you, Hope? What would you rather make, breakfast, lunch, or dinner?
Dinner.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
I'm not a breakfast person, but I'd rather have like a nice home cooked dinner. I used to make a really nice paella. My current stove can't fit the paella pot, but I really enjoy like feeding people and having people come over, and so
That's great. Well, listen,
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being on with us today. The book is called The Resilience Workbook for Women. It's a transformative guide to discover your inner strength, conquer adversity, and achieve your goals, as we talked about today. I love the transparency. Frank, thank you too, man. He asked some great questions today. You got personal about your own business. I really appreciate you too.
We have 3 goals with Learn from People Who Lived It. 1. To help you feel less alone. 2. Encourage you to seek out a coach, a therapist, a church, anyone who can help you get through your journey and find some healing. 3. When you're ready, share your story with us.
Find Learn from People Who Lived It, wherever you get podcasts. Search it using all one word. Learn from People Who Lived It.